What if you could afford your dream home? Not the starter home, not a condo, but the home you actually want. The one with the extra bedroom and the yard and everything in between. And what if the monthly payment actually felt like rent? That is the promise being dangled by the Trump administration right now to help millions of Americans locked out of the housing market get access to home ownership. It is the 50-year mortgage. On the surface, it sounds helpful, but let's unveil the math behind the scenes to figure out if this 50-year mortgage is the next best thing for medical professionals, especially newer grads wanting to get into a house, or if it's a financial disaster. I'm Kristen Burton, the founder of Millionaires in Medicine and a practicing critical care PA. We've helped hundreds of medical professionals get into the houses that they want with all sorts of strategies ranging from conventional financing to medical professional loans and everything in between. Whether or not this new 50-year mortgage is going to change the game for medical professionals isn't a question. It's really, does it change the game for better or for worse? The context for why we might need something like this is obvious. Home prices have increased somewhere between 30 to 50% since 2020, depending on the market. We've seen an increase in interest rates over that time, and those two things have coupled to make housing incredibly difficult to afford. For new grads coming out with student loan debt and not a lot of savings, the prospect of saving $100,000 down payment to get into a house is daunting and honestly, a lot of times not very practical. This is why Trump has raised his hand and said, how about a 50-year mortgage? We would lower monthly payments and then give people access to homeownership that currently feel like they can't get in. So what actually happens when you buy a house that way? Let's look at a $400,000 house. This is actually not an expensive house. The median home price in the United States is somewhere in the 420s. So this is even a little on the low side. So we can get an idea of, just from a very common practical standpoint, even if we're not going out and buying the dream home, what does a 50-year mortgage do to the life of the loan? Well, for this scenario, we'll assume you actually did have 20% down. That means you have a loan balance of $320,000, and we'll assume an interest rate of 6.5% for simplicity. Let's first look at the 30-year mortgage, right? Because that's the standard since the Great Depression by which most people go into homeownership. Your monthly payment would be just over $2,000 a month. This does not include taxes and insurance. This is just principal and interest. Over 30 years, your total interest paid is going to sit just over $400,000. If you're like, whoa, read that back, say it again. Yes, that is the truth. Even for a 30-year mortgage, the total interest in this case exceeds $400,000, which was the purchase price of the house. When you factor in your total cost of just the loan repayment, it's over $725,000. When you think about what you paid for the home all in, including your down payment, you paid over $800,000 for a $400,000 house. That's a 30-year mortgage. If you didn't know how much you're paying in interest when you buy a house, hello, here we are. Now, what happens if we extend that out to a 50-year term? Of course, your monthly mortgage drops. Now our principal and interest payment is down at around $1,800 a month. So the extension of this loan from 30 years to 50 years saves you about $200 a month every single month. For a lot of folks, that can make a big difference. What happens to your total interest paid? It balloons up to $762,000. This drives your total cost of the house well over $1 million, right? You paid $400,000 for this thing. You paid over $750,000 in interest. So you have paid well over $1 million to live in a $400,000 house. That's kind of alarming, right? The interest itself is sort of mind-boggling. Now, of course, you're going to get some tax benefit for interest paid on a mortgage, but I think the more prudent thing to look at is, does it actually matter if you decide, hey, I'm going to extend my mortgage from 30 years to 50 years, but I'm going to invest the difference? This is the key question. For those of us who are out there trying to build wealth, trying to figure out how in the world we can invest more early on while still having the house, while still dealing with the student loans, that's the question to ask and answer. If I take that 50-year mortgage, I invest what I would have been paying every month to a 30-year mortgage payment, do I come out ahead? The answer, no. If you've done that for 30 years, you've invested the difference, you end up with over $200,000 invested after a 30-year term as a result of that one single decision to invest the difference, which is incredible. But at this interest rate, you actually come out behind. When you look at that 30-year mark and you factor in, what is my home worth? What is the amount that I still owe on the loan, right? At the 30-year mark, you still have 20 more years to go for it to be paid off. And then how much do I have invested? You actually come out behind by doing the 50-year mortgage. Now, of course, if your property massively appreciates, that will benefit you, but it'll benefit you in both cases, whether you're looking at the 30-year mortgage or the 50-year mortgage. So if that variable stays the same, it doesn't help make the decision between which loan to pursue. Based on this information and the massive amount of interest associated with a 50-year mortgage term, it's not something I would personally do. Now, of course, if this is the only way you feel like it's possible to buy a house, you could consider it. If your issue is not the monthly payment, but in fact the down payment, medical professional loans can be a very easy solution to that. You can get into a house oftentimes with less than 5% down, sometimes 0% down, pay no PMI, and in many cases you can still get access to fixed interest rate products in that way. That doesn't address the monthly payment issue, but it does address your ability to get into a house as a relatively new clinician. If you're concerned about whether or not you can afford a monthly payment, here's a quick rule of thumb. Your total housing expense should be less than 20% of your gross income on a monthly basis. So let's say you earned $120,000 a year. That means you would gross $10,000 a month, which means your mortgage should be under $2,000 a month. Easy math, right? That metric is actually difficult to do in this housing market, but not impossible for six-figure earning medical professionals. And it matters almost more for us than it does for most people because we also have a mortgage-sized student loan payment to contend with, which most folks that have less than $30,000 of student loan debt, for example, do not. Now, if you want help with this, we have a free guide put together to help medical professionals buy a house in this market, in this interest rate environment. So it's totally free, linked below. Go down, click that, and get access. If you're looking to buy a house in the next few years, you'll want to make sure that you read that first to avoid expensive mistakes.